Hi, and welcome to Together, the podcast where we dive into the relational space, conscious partnership, conscious parenting. And before we dive into it, just a quick shout out to our Together online community that's officially open. We've had 2 live calls already. So if you want to dive into your relationship even more, you already feel love, but you want to deepen in it, just go down to the show notes. There's the link where you can hop in there. So today we have a really special guest, and we're so excited to have her. She has been such an ally in our life as Courtney and I have been parenting. She is a therapeutic counselor, a parenting coach, writer, speaker, researcher. She has her master's in psychology with a specialization. This is what I'm really excited about. She has a specialization in youth and child psychology. And I feel there is so much as parents raising this next upcoming generation. There are so many tools that are required to do it in a really sound way, especially because there's so much more research and studies that have been done. So we're really excited to have Miriam Martineau. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
And just to orient you all to how Miriam is in our world, when I first moved to the Slocan Valley and started, being interconnected with different beloved friends, I started hearing about Miriam and feeling really inspired by her because she has this course called Parenting as a Spiritual Practice and was really, embodying that as a mama and walking that walk and, teaching and guiding people. And I was so curious. And so I actually went and did a few sessions with her well before becoming a mom in my preparing to be a mom and feeling into my own journey of really wanting to parent in a way that was walking it as a spiritual path, being really conscious in it and doing a lot of preparatory work as well. And then when we ended up having our little guy, she's been a really key person that we've leaned into at different moments for guidance. And one of the things I experienced and that I hear friends speak to is, you can move towards her with this feeling of, what do I do? This feels so big. I just help. And then she just comes in and she orients you. And what I find is this beautiful combo of her actually having walked the path and embodied it. And her daughter is now, I think in her early 20s, right? So that embodiment as a mama and also just your wealth of experience, Miriam, in how you've seen many children grow and supported many parents. And so, and as parents, we need that, when we're in the thick of it. And if we don't have, maybe people to lean into for guidance, Miriam's really been that for us. And so we're just really excited to share her with you and to dive into some of these topics.
Yeah, one of the mantras that comes up in the house or statements that comes up is, I wonder what Miriam would do here. Miriam would here.
Yeah.
As we're parenting Cedar.
Yeah.
So we're excited to dive in a little deeper, and something that our listeners really love from us and from the people that come on our show is just sharing the lived experience, the vulnerable pieces. And so maybe starting off, I'd love to hear from you, Miriam, why people tuning in right now who are just starting to listen, why would they want to listen to you when it comes to the development of children and parenting?
Ooh, beautiful question. My quick first answer would be I think it's one of the most important things we do on earth as humans is to accompany and raise little people to become their own selves. Um, I really think as we consider humanity, where we're at this, you know, time in history and where we're heading, I can't think of really anything more precious, sacred, important than how we raise the next generation, which as you know, we've alluded to many times, includes how we raise ourselves or how we reparent ourselves. I do think, ideally, if we really want to make change happen on this planet towards, something that's a lot more sane and beneficial to all, we need to obviously also look at the big systemic structural changes that need to happen. But as far as places where we actually have a lot of say, a lot of choice and control, it's actually in our own homes. It's how we show up as individuals and in the most intimate connections we have, be that with our partners or our children.
Yes.
Mhm.
This is so what Mike and I why we feel so passionate about the relational space. It's like revolution in the home,
Yeah.
just in those daily ways that we rewrite how we're showing up as parents and how we're showing up in partnership.
Yeah, and when we're talking about this collective piece, I'm so curious from your lens because you've been doing this for a long time now. What have you seen as some of the most consistent patterns that need to be shifted in the home to be able to really inform the new way?
Mhm.
Mhm. Oh, there's quite a few. Maybe we'll start with the individual. I think one thing is to fully take in the both the in a way the challenge and also the incredible potential that a lot of what we convey to our children is actually through what we live, what we breathe, what we model. Like in a way, we parent more who we are than what we say or what we expect them to do. So there's this very intrinsic, almost like invitation or demand that we literally evolve ourselves so that we can help our children evolve. Um, so I think sort of, a short way to capture that would just be like parenting through modeling. um, how do we show up day in day out, because they're always watching us. They might always be listening to us, but they're definitely always watching us. So that can be a little daunting. It's like, oh my god. And at the same time, it offers this incredible invitation to like recreate culture right in your midst as a family, and to look at everything that you have inherited. Um, and it's almost like doing a spring cleaning where you pick everything up, from concepts to words you use to ways you respond to things or you react to how you envision your life, like literally all the parts of how a life is inhabited. You look at each little bit and you go, am I going to take this along, and as I do my spring cleaning, and I'm going to include it and even let it flourish and celebrate it in this culture I'm creating in my family? Am I going to recycle it because it needs a little bit of spiffing up and then it'll be okay? Or am I going to bring it to the dump, right? Actually let it go, release it. And to see that as an ongoing practice. You were saying how the course I teaches parenting as a spiritual practice. I really want to emphasize that, because I think we can get a little stuck on parenting as a spiritual result, or like we need to kind of be there, have it all. It's impossible, right? Humans are so complex and dynamic, each of us. And there's so much that even a child brings to earth. They really don't come as blank slates. And it will always be somewhat of a mystery. How much have they inherited? How much do they just bring as their own individual, unique fingerprint? But they're definitely not blank slates. And so I think the idea of more seeing it as a journey, as an evolutionary practice, where we keep every day showing up to the best of our capacity and knowing that we can keep lifting the ceiling of how much consciousness we bring to this and how much integrity and dignity. Um, but it's not at all about getting it perfect. So I kind of wanted to combine that with the modeling piece. Maybe a last one, which we can see if we want to get into more. But I really feel one of the things I do in my work is try to kind of get to the deeper leverage points. So rather than go, you need to do this in this situation, that in that situation, because there's always going to be millions of situations. And so that can just be a lot to carry in a parent's mind. I like to get to sort of the deeper fulcrum points, if you will, where if you get that, the rest will kind of float up from there. And one of those that I encounter over and over again in my work with parents is the need to develop the capacity to hold at least more than one perspective at once. So we obviously inhabit our own subjective perspective. That one's quite natural to us. And yet, with a little one or with a partner, right, there's right there's a whole other perspective. There's a whole other subjective perspective. And to be able to stay true to oneself while, as much as possible, considering looking behind the eyes of your child, that already requires holding two perspectives. Another way that shows up, and just doing that will change your parenting, right? If you just do that as a practice. Another way that shows up is um, there can be a tendency when one thinks of conscious parenting to sort of really want to honor the child as a full human being, which is awesome. If you only do that, you're forgetting the developmental aspect, that they're actually also little people that have a lot of growing up to do. And that moving to the just honoring them as a full human being that's, complete and intact, and I want to listen to you and do what you want to do, that is partial and incredibly important. But if it's the only thing you do, you're forgetting this other piece, which we're trying to move away from, which, historically has been very prominent, which is you're just a kid, you're just a little person, you have to do as I say, I know better. It's just because I told you to, and no explanation, right? We're trying to move away from that. We have to be careful that we don't lose that developmental thing. So, to be able to engage with your child both simultaneously as a whole, as a human being, and at the same time as a human becoming, like the two simultaneously. And I find that such a fascinating art, because when you combine two seeming opposites, or you kind of walking a paradox, if you can really do it, there's a third that emerges every single time, right? There's actually a third quality. It's not this, it's not that, it's the two together. And so, this capacity to hold at least two perspectives and listen for what's the third that emerges allows for a much fuller unlocking, I think, of the potential of parenting. In the landscape we're talking about, which are how can we raise kids as well as possible so they don't have to get over their childhood, like so that their child it can be more like a springboard for their life. Um, and also how our parenting, even if it just feels like nobody's seeing what we're doing, our best work happens in the invisible often, right? At middle of the night or under the kitchen table playing with Legos. Like it's often really in private that you do your best work. But to see how it connects with the much bigger whole, as far as transforming humanity onto a path that, yeah, that is more blessed for everyone.
I love how, as you're describing that, just that being and becoming, that's also so much in the partnership. Like,
Mm.
when you were describing that, I was like, "Oh, that's also so much of the learning is we both have a being and a becoming, and how we hold both of those and that ability to hold." And then even the relationship itself has sort of a being and becoming. So I was feeling just the layers of that. And what I love everything you're saying, Miriam, and I guess I want to ask you to go a little bit deeper, and I'm a little bit curious about this part because what I'm hearing in this theme of what you're describing, and I really see this as a piece that mothers in my generation are sort of munching on, is rewriting this idea that that mothers actually get to be themselves too, because it's almost like this collective unwinding where the mother had to be so selfless, and that good mothering is actually not being yourself, and it's your ability to put yourself aside. And what I'm really hearing in what you're describing there is the ability for the mother and the father to feel themselves, to also be themselves. And in this role modeling, if we're not being ourselves, we actually can't role model that union of the being and becoming. And I love just if you could speak more to that piece of the role of the parents' connection to self in that.
Yeah, that is, I really appreciate that inquiry. So I think one helpful distinction in that conversation, which I agree a lot of people are chewing on, is
Mhm.
to have an intrapersonal discernment between, like, who am I actually, or who is each of us, right? Because we can think I need to be myself, and it can be very much the ego self that doesn't want to surrender to another person, that actually can feel a lot of rivalry, even if very subtle, with one's child. Like, you have too many needs. I don't have any more time for myself, right? It can get into kind of a battle like that. So when I speak about this human being and human becoming, in a way, the invitation is for each of us to land more and more fully into who we truly are. So the distinction between our constructed representational, sometimes called ego self, and the authentic essence or your soul, your true being. And what I have discovered, in my own practice and in working with many families is there's a lot of conflict when it comes to the ego self. But if you actually do, as part of your journey, the commitment to always coming back home to your true self, there's actually not that much friction between you and your kids' needs. Of course, you're still in a physical body. You have actual needs, and it's so important then also to include this piece I spoke about just earlier, which is the modeling. It's like it's such a helpful thing to keep going. Okay, yes, I obviously my child, especially the younger they are, the more they have these very sort of immediate needs. So there is a huge degree of surrender. If you see it as a spiritual practice, um, and you see it as more the question is, as I'm giving in to these needs in the early years, is it actually bringing me more home to myself? Like, where's the conflict coming from? So that's basically a whole other layer to your question, because we talk
Mhm.
about self like it's just this one thing, but no, that it really depends which self you're talking about. And I think um, it's so important that a mother and a father don't lose touch with their true self.
Mm.
It's actually potentially okay if they lose touch with their ego self to some degree,
Mhm.
while
Yeah.
staying connected with what they need just for health and for survival and for well-being. And that I find that distinction often isn't made in both the relational partnership space and in the parenting space.
Yeah, we're that make how I make sense of that, just to put it in other words. I was just processing this, right? About how, um, as a mom, what I find is before I became a mom, and that was the version of Courtney that was learning to reparent herself, there were times where I was letting myself be my ego self so that I could sort of raise my ego self. It was like this external dance, right? Like I'm letting myself be my young self. And now that I'm a mom and I have a really little one, so I'm very engaged and present, that part of the dance isn't there so much. It's sort of like my ego is tucked in more and I'm parenting it from the inside, but really this ability to sit in my bigger self and that my child is more the part that is taking up that ego space and developing his ego space. And I find it's a way I'm relating with that younger ego self very differently as a mom and the way that I relate with it than I did before.
Mm. It's kind
Yeah.
of beautiful too because as you're sharing, I'm like, we learn so much when we're parents about the depth of care and compassion and empathy to another being. And it can actually then rub off on the connection within ourselves to our younger self.
Yes.
Often
Oh,
when I'm
yes.
working with
Yes.
individuals, especially with parents, I'll actually borrow what I know they have learned to do really well as parents, and I'll say, "You are an incredible mother or an incredible father. So can you now take that posture that you have when you're parenting and actually shine it towards your younger self?"
Mhm. Yes. Yes.
Because I really don't think we grow up by kind of getting whipped into shape. It's literally being loved into evolution. Um, while holding ourselves accountable. And you make an interesting distinction too, which is we become parents somewhere along our journey. And most of us are not yet fully integrated and fully healed. So there will be ongoing work in that realm. That has plenty of space in the parenting journey. One, as far as modeling, right? Yeah, I think it's really helpful and it takes a huge burden off parents if they just never put themselves on a pedestal with their kids and actually say, I'm a human being who's practicing becoming an ever finer human being. I've had a lot more time to practice, so hopefully I can help you out a lot on this journey. And I am, in charge of your well-being until you can take charge of your own well-being. So I'm showing up as your parent and I'm on the journey too. And hopefully I'm sort of at the cutting edge of my journey and can help you be right at the growing edge of yours.
Yes.
But that takes a lot, then if you have a moment of collapse or a moment of despair or a moment of just being overcome by some emotion or something, if your child's very young and you feel like that would be too much, like they haven't yet settled into their own sovereignty, then there's a then ideally you can contain that until you can do it in your private space, maybe when your little one's sleeping. And otherwise, it can actually be this extraordinary moment of showing the vulnerability of being a human. I
Mhm.
don't know if you guys have memories. Like I have memories of seeing my mum sometimes just tear up or have a hard day or have to retreat into her room for some quiet time. And in a way that is as informative
Mhm.
to, being parented as the parent that has it all together all the time, which is none of us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's actually modeling being how to be in life, right? How to actually be in life. Yeah.
There's this funny little anecdote from when our daughter was, maybe she was about 1.5, and she just was really elongating the going to bed time, and I was doing the whole practice of like, sweetheart, it's time for bed now, let's go. And, moving it along, just wasn't happening. And at one point, spontaneously, I had a moment of just like, kind of hitting a wall. And I just sat on her bed and got really quiet. And I think I just put my face in my hands and was silent. And she got really still from being like squiggly and wriggly. She got really still. And then I heard her little say, "Mama, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm praying for patience." And something in her just woke up a little bit at that moment. It was so interesting. I could just feel how she was like, "Whoa, my mom is praying for patience." And then it was quiet for a little bit more. And then she says, "Okay, I think you have enough now." And then we continued, but it was it's I share it as an anecdote because it kind of blends a whole bunch of things, like partly the modeling, like when we're at a loss, we can pray to um, what we feel is our God, is the source of life, of love, of energy and healing, um, and also we don't have it all together, right? And sometimes we can't change something, but we can change the space between us in a way by showing vulnerability. I think the key thing around the vulnerability with our children is you don't want them to get swamped by your undealt with processes. Like ultimately you are the parent, so if it's a flooding of the whole thing where suddenly you're reacting to them, but then the whole thing becomes about you,
Mhm.
you kind of lost the plot as a parent.
Mhm.
And it happens, so then you model forgiveness and compassion and starting over and all these good things. Um, but otherwise it's, yeah, so the vulnerability is when in a way you're deeply in touch with your true self. Like
Mhm.
it's not a dumping energetically, and it's not an overwhelming the nervous system of your little one.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I want to go deeper when you talked about earlier a moment of collapse or despair. Something that I'm just curious about, even in my own personal journey. It feels like a newer part that I've reached with Cedar, and I feel like it's a big one that I've watched with so many fathers. So I'm curious in any insights you have around this of where little boys, when they develop and hit the place of toddlerhood where they're really like their testosterone's high, they're really in their power. What I've noticed is there can be this dance in myself where at first it would almost invoke, and it still does, but it'll invoke almost that same energy where I'll want to meet it with aggression or anger. And then I notice the swing in my nervous system is not wanting to embody that or model that. And I can watch my system goes into a collapse. And then his life energy ends up taking more space. And then I notice inside, and I imagine one piece, what you talked about earlier, is holding more than one perspective. But I'm curious on that place where when collapse comes in as more than a moment, what insights do you have around the aggression, little boys coming into their power where it is healthy for them to be throwing things, pushing, kicking, like where they're actually, that's like appropriate? What would your advice be for, let's say, fathers and mothers, I guess, but where I've really seen it is with fathers who mm, either are in the place where it invokes the aggression or they collapse? How to rewire that or rework that?
Yeah. Yeah, partly it is just the father's work with themselves, right? Which is to notice where has aggression, or sort of what one might call the um the destructive elements of strength, where have those either where have those been moved into the shadow realm, right, where they're suppressed but then they come out in these crazy moments, like how, where are they not integrated, so that in a way that is the journey of the individual, then the father, the mother, different caretakers. It's like when we hit that place where we get reactive, like where our child's behavior kind of digs into us. And I mean, maybe we can just back up quickly. Like for me, a trigger, one short definition of a trigger is when, at a moment's notice, everything that I have matured into, that I've gathered, that I've gained as a developing human, flies out the window at a moment's notice. Like I'm aghast. I'm
Mhm.
like, how the hell did that happen? Like what are, like literally, like the movement from the higher brain to the lower brain can be like instant, and it's like you tumbled from from the high ceilings of your beautiful upstairs down into the basement and you don't even know how you fell down the stairs. It's like that quick. Like that for me would be trigger, right? That knee jerk reaction where something is, it's like poked or punched or caught in ourselves, and we literally lose our usual daily life and higher capacities. And in my view, those are kind of incredible moments because they're total telltale signs that there is some shadow there. There's something that's not integrated. And I often give this this I often share the story of a father I was working with who is a mediator, peacekeeper by trade. Beautiful, very integrated in many ways. And anger was an emotion that he was uncomfortable with, literally more through his typology. He's in Enneagram 9, like more through his typology than through his upbringing. So it wasn't a household where anger couldn't be expressed, but his typology was very uncomfortable with it. And when there was conflict in the household, he would often just kind of evaporate, like disappear to his room or go outside, growing up. And then he had two boys, and the two boys ended up being incredibly feisty boys. Like these were not the
Yeah.
mellow kind of boys. These were like, you know full on,
Mhm.
a lot of explosions, a lot of anger. And it was so fascinating working with him, where he would recognize exactly what you're saying. Like on the one hand, well, he for him it wasn't even, it was so something, in a way, an energy that had been suppressed in him. So there wasn't really ever the explosion that happened on his end, but there was definitely the freeze. Just like I don't know what to do here. This is just highly uncomfortable, and I'm freaking out on the inside. And and from the freeze, more of a collapse, like just trying to accommodate and adapt to these big energies, right? Which we know, that energy needs to express itself, but if it's not contained, we're actually not doing our
Mhm.
boys a service.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
he, in with his therapist, he started doing a lot of the shadow work of like, what is this energy of anger? What is this? Because he could see in his boys. I remember him saying to me, I can see that there's a health to that energy. Like I'm almost in admiration of it because I haven't claimed it for myself.
Mhm.
And then I did a lot of work with him too on like what is the essence of anger, and because it often gets such a bad rap, like sort of the big, stormy, aggressive, whether you want to call that all anger, but that kind of energetic storm of, and it can be quite destructive. It gets a bad rap. So I did a lot of work with him. Was like, what is in its essence? What is it? And what we came to is like, in its essence, anger is clarity, it's boundary, it's truth. Like there's something very beautiful underneath the storm. It's like a banishing of bullshit. It's a laying down of stakes in the ground. In a way, it's Jesus turning over the tables in the temple, right? Like this will not be a place of commerce. This is a place for sacred. Um, so that was really helpful to go, okay, we don't need to cancel out the big energy, neither in our sons or in ourselves. But it's an invitation to find sort of almost like the straightened spine, that where are the lines in the sand? Where are the healthy boundaries? Where is the beautiful no that is actually life giving rather than life suppressing? And I know we've talked about this, Mike and Courtney, in the past, is that move actually demands in ourselves as mothers and fathers, although you asked it from the father perspective, which I really appreciate, this both and piece, which is, can I in this moment when my son is in a way exploding, can I give him, I mean, you're sort of asking the question about discipline. Think of him like a river, right? Sort of like the Slocan River, which we're very familiar with. Okay, so the Slocan River is actually kind of a cool example, because right between where I live and where you live, it doesn't have very many river banks, in the sense it does a whole bunch of oxbows and a whole bunch of loops, right? So it actually takes up a lot of space. Now that kind of works in the Slocan Valley because it's just one river, right? Or one river, one human. But if the valley now had hundreds of humans and they were all doing that, the whole land would be flooded and there'd actually be no solid land to live on. Like, rivers need riverbanks, and to me that's like the river is like the unique life force, life energy of a human, or in this case of your son or a child. Our project as parents is to not um, dam the river, right? We want the child's energy to keep flowing, but we want to give it some river banks so that it can learn to coexist with other rivers, right? So some containment, some awareness of other people, of effect on other people, of time and space to let out the big running through the forest with a stick when it's completely fine, or doing it in the living room when there's another little one visiting, right? Big difference in context. And so the invitation here is to this both and perspective of, how can I source the deepest clarity that I know my son needs in a given moment without closing off my heart?
Mm.
Because usually the shutting down of an energy comes with the shutting down of connection.
Mhm.
And that's the problem. The problem isn't saying, whoa, we need to contain this a little bit here. That's not the problem. The problem is that we do that often from our own triggeredness, reaction, close the heart, and then there's a loss of connection.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
actually the problem. So again,
Mhm.
if you can hold two perspectives, like open heart and a no, because culturally we have connected yeses with connection, with love, with empathy, with compassion, with celebration, with like all the nice things, love, um, uh, relationship, like relational intimacy. And we've connected no's with separation and isolation and closing down and shutting down shop and not possible and all these things. And what we want to do is, in a way, marry things that have been separate by having very clear no's, or containment, or guidance, or literally the male energy of, this is not okay. I am in charge here. I'm going to guide us in a different direction, with this deep so that this is in a way a condition, right? You're bringing conditionality into the parenting space, but you combine it with unconditional, unshakable, forever and ever love and connection. And I've got you, and I'm never deserting you. And we've got this, and we'll get through this together. And I'm making eye contact with you, and my heart is bursting with love for you right now. And I will absolutely not let you take this stick in the vicinity of your playmates right now because your energy is completely ungrounded. And I love you to
Mhm.
bits, and we'll get through this.
What I'm really hearing there too is when you circling back to when you said in these scenarios, it's so the parents work. What I really hear is in the external expression, not damming down, not damning their energy, but banking it and guiding it. So what I'm really hearing there is for the parent also practicing the awareness of the places that are either that are being damned, and then bringing love, like it sounds like you know in that example that you use with that father, actually bringing love to that place that he was damming down inside of himself,
Yeah.
so that that energy can be guided instead of just shutting down.
Yeah,
And I really
exactly.
love that. And I really love that because I feel like you're answering the question that I wanted to ask in this conversation as well. Is what I really hear you describing is the essence of coherence building,
Mhm.
where it's bringing in the love and the connection, you know, the antidote to these places of trigger and shutdown and loss of connection. It's like really nurturing what's needed for the connection to happen.
Mm.
Yeah, and I love that you just said that because we are incredibly tender, vulnerable creatures, right? I mean, life's hard, we're sensitive, it's a lot. I think every human would kind of agree and say, yeah, being human's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
It's really not for the faint of
Mm.
heart. So
Yes.
as we're bringing this holding two perspectives, and we're holding in a way the conditionality or the male demand for deep integrity with the unconditional, um, never ending, unshakable, unconditional love, as we bring those together, if you can kind of deliver them together like one recipe. However, in my experience working as a therapist with a lot of adults, you kind of want to lead with the unconditional love.
Mhm.
And I've seen this. I've worked with people who are just so there can be so much shame around shadow, like, and unintegrated aspects of self. And my observation has been that the degree to which someone can actually face their shadows is contingent upon how much they love themselves.
Mhm.
And the greater they can access love to self, that's kind of like the ideal context. It creates a lot of buffer around tipping into shame, right? So in a way, it's almost like you connect first, you beam love first, you make eye contact with your son first when he's firing up, and you're like, son, I've got you. I love you. We're going to get through this. Like, you first do the connection thing. Or if you're working with your partner or another adult, it's like, I love you. We're good. We'll get through this. And can I give you some feedback? Right. So it's kind of like front ending, like with the love, because it makes everything else possible.
Well, and I what
Mhm.
and if I can, I wanna give a little example in this of where what you're describing just to, because with this piece around our son's anger, it's really interesting because what Mike and I are working out in our relationship right now, we've been with this is our 5th year, and so we're differentiating more in our bond. So now what's coming in is we built so much love that now parts of us are needing to assert more, right? So we're differentiating more. So and both of us, our anger was really not allowed when we were children, or it wasn't met in a good way. So both of us, there's parts of us that didn't differentiate properly when we were this age too, where we got to be angry and say no, or we didn't get to sort of be like, that doesn't feel good for me. And so now here we are, we're going through that process as a couple of like finding the places where we've been collapsing or not really asserting who we really are. And I've been having this real awareness of, oh, that's alive in both of our nervous systems. And then our son is embodying it, right? But he's embodying it way better than we are because he's being
Sure.
loved in it. So he's just like, and he has no shame about it, which yay that we've created an environment where it's welcome. But for me, where the ahas are coming is when I can see that, oh, like he's expressing the no to differentiate. And the better I'm getting, we just had a beautiful moment this morning where he went so into it and I was able to just really see that that's what it was. Like, right, differentiation. And then it actually landed in my nervous system when he felt it really deeply. And then we came into this beautiful co-regulation. And then afterwards, I was like, wow, you felt that anger so deeply. That was amazing. And he was like, yeah. And then we were connected and feeling good. But I can see what was sort of missing in the recipe for me was seeing that it's like the place where we haven't been able to meet him is the place where we are still integrating that part in ourselves.
In a way, his behavior triggers something in you that makes your experience of his behavior actually more about your experience of your own unintegrated material.
Yes.
True.
Projected onto him.
Yeah. But then if we can build that muscle, which I think we've been doing a good job of for the most part of, okay, this is ours. Like we're stuck here because there's something here. And building that muscle, then it becomes a gift, right? It's like, yay, he's showing me. And then instead of it being like, then it's like, oh, he's showing me. Okay, yay, yay, yay. And I mean, that's such the gift. And this is where, in this theme of together, we've been really like, this is where the family nervous system, we're actually all growing and learning those edges together. Exactly. Not that, I mean, the way Mike and I work with it is very different than how Cedar does. His job is just to feel it, and it's our job to figure out how to meet him. But if he can do a good job of feeling it, and we can do our work with it, then we're journeying together. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And a beautiful, I mean, this is where parenting as a spiritual practice is incredibly effective because for one thing, it's 24/7. It's like so exactly what you need to learn, right? Like,
yes.
It's not a coincidence. And it's kind of in your face. And you also are gifted with this already existing deep love for your kid. Plus, he's cute.
Yeah.
There's like a whole package in the parenting that is so conducive to evolution. And you said it at the very beginning, Courtney, all the things that I teach in the parenting space are basically identical to what I share when I'm working with couples. It's no different. The only thing that's different is in the parenting dynamic, one has more responsibility and is, more in charge, whereas in partnerships, there'd be, more equality in that sense. But I completely just am celebrating you sharing the work you're doing here, with your son. Because as I heard you speak, I was like, yes, you are healing. You're literally doing generational healing in your family. You are doing the opposite of what I call secondhand parenting, where we just pass on what was passed on to us. In a way, you're tying up some loose ends and then forging a new path forwards with him, which is, I just want to say this to you and anyone listening. It's like, this is not just something that's good for you and your lineages. Every time you kind of have a breakthrough like that, and not that it's a sudden breakthrough, it can be over months and years, but every time you're breaking through, I strongly believe that you're doing on behalf of the whole. Like you're carving tracks in the sand, and because you've done that, it's easier for other families and other couples and other parents to do. So I don't think we can underestimate the ripple effect.
I'm getting so many chills.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. There couldn't be more truth to that. I just even see that in my own internal experience where I feel that I have a lot of awareness and consciousness around that. And I'd say even people, and there's lots of places I'm not, yet I can still, when you say that, I can see the places where the unintegrated parts of me are scanning for the modelship outside. Like I'm looking for men that are modeling qualities I didn't get. It's great. The places I got it, it's integrated. I don't need it as much. It's helpful to be around to keep it fed, but I can see the part of me that's scanning of who I want in my inner circle in relationships, who I'm going to take information from when it comes to business. I'm looking for their values. I'm looking for the felt sense, the qualities that how they're living their life matches a place of connection, attunement, respect, compassion, love, appreciation. And so I love that you're highlighting that piece. So many ahas in me of sometimes I so think that I have some figured out. And then I parent, and the spiritual practice shows me how the weight of work I still have to do. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, wow. Okay, another
Well,
layer of the
exactly.
onion.
I mean, it is
It's
humbling. And that
it's
is
Yeah.
so humbling.
right, because you could be sitting on a meditation cushion somewhere in, the Himalayas,
Mm.
think you got it pat down, and then,
Yeah.
how the saying goes, go home for Christmas to your family or become a family. Or just
Yes.
or just relationship. If you're in an evolutionary contract with your partner, that a lot of that will come up. But there are some things that will only come up with your child, your children, and there's other things that will only come up with your partner because
Mhm.
it's like a particular recipe. Um, but that's where suddenly triggers and that feeling of a charge. It really is a gift because it is the
Mm.
sign. It's like, oh, okay, noted. You know, because um you could also be someone where anger has been integrated or that kind of big explosive energy has been integrated. You're quite comfortable with it. You can be in a room facilitating a whole bunch of people and that there's someone who's just like that, and your nervous system just stays chill. Like, so you can hold space for it, actually hold like inner space for that energy. um and so then if you were one of those people, when your kid has an explosion, you will just notice. It's like, oh, you know, my son or my daughter is really enraged right now. Um, I wonder what's going on. Maybe we can figure that out because it's a language that's being spoken. So let's figure out what's behind it. So you'll notice it, but it's not like, oh, or I can't believe, or shit, we're doing a terrible job as parents. Like, that when the reaction comes, it's like, okay, so then when you look for your mentors, like that's kind of where I wanted to go back to. Is like, then you already got some really good insights. It's like, can I find someone who I can receive transmission or just experience modeling or learn from? What does it look like to have uh, to inhabit that powerful energy of know, of clarity, of in a way, the pride also of being a human, the sovereignty, the freedom, the truth. Like, these are all amazing qualities that you can all find sort of in that energetic quality of roaring.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
there's a question I really wanted to ask you, and it sort of dovetails on this, but it feels like an important one. Is I wonder if you could speak to, and we're on the pulse of it, but just how the relationship between mother and father, or between the two primary caregivers, how does that impact the relational world of the child?
yeah, hugely. For obvious reasons. I mean, depending on what kind of scope of village a child is embedded in, if there's lots of aunts and uncles and neighbors and friends, then it sort of gets spread out a bit. But the more nuclear, in a way, the more full on the imprint. And I'd say, regardless, it's a big imprint because it is that primary relationship and relational example that a child is not just observing, but imbued by. I mean, it's like what's happening between the two of you fills the energetic, the sort of the subtle space of your household, even if you're, watchful of your language or making sure that if you get into a more explosive argument, that you might do it, when your son's asleep, or like, even if you're taking care of some containment, not repression, but containment, like right time, right place kind of thing. Um, yeah, energetically it fills the space, right? There's really no way around that. It's interesting, I just had two recent talks with grown women who both have had, when they go back to their childhood, teenage, geographical location, like city, and the other case a rural place, they have felt anxiety, and they have actually for many years not even wanting to go back. And I was inquiring with them, like, what is it? Because from a lot of markers, their childhood was beautiful, right?
Mhm.
And the one thing both of them noted, and this could be a coincidence, but it's just coming to mind as you're asking this question, was that there was a lot of tension between the parents. And that in both cases led to separation of the parents, and both parents being very decent in both cases, like wonderful humans.
Mhm.
But their sort of adult reflecting on why they would have this energetic block against going back, they said it, and they literally individually said it of their own accord. They said it was tense. It was like my nervous system was always on high alert. It was a tense growing up, and um, yeah, they wanted to stay away from it for quite a while. So that's God. I mean, I'm saying that I almost feel bad because I'm like, oh shit, that's a lot for us adults to hold, because sometimes it's really hard being in partnership and keeping the coherence and the love and the good vibe going. I mean, there's many things we can do, and that would be a whole other conversation. And maybe I'd be happy to talk more about that at one point. But um, again, I think anything the each parent can do to practice what we're talking about in the parenting, but also in themselves and with their partners, is worth gold, right? And again, to think of it, it's a practice, because your child will grow up, become an adult, will be imperfect, will enter into an imperfect relationship that also has its own evolution. So presenting it's all wonderful and figured out, well, if it is, awesome, but that's highly unlikely. And so, in a way, we're right back at what we were talking about earlier. Some things in couples are best done in containment so that the child doesn't need a bear witness. Anything one can do, I think, we're in an age of expression, of being authentic, of being vulnerable, which I think is incredible. And sometimes we tip into barfing, dumping, unloading. Like we so don't want to repress that we're actually not aware of when is appropriate time and place.
Yes.
And this is why I always bring in this word containment. Containment is literally being an adult and going, this needs to be dealt with. It's not now the time. I need to keep working fiercely on my own internal nervous system regulation. In this heated moment, we need to remove ourselves and deal with it once we've recovered. Like that. I mean, I say it's fierce because it's fierce work. Like, all of us who've been sort of in the fire of, a trigger being flared right when our partner's there and our kids there. It's like, it's kind of intense, right?
Mhm.
It's not for the faint of heart. Again, this is like the work of being in a way, almost like a nervous system warrior.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and the challenge of I know for Mike and I, we have so many tools and skills, but now what our pressure cooker is just having a very vibrant, alive toddler. So there isn't the space to just like, oh, we'll just stop here and we'll just, it's like that doesn't exist. Or like if it is, it's for a minute, which isn't long enough for our nervous system. So we're really having to work at building enough times that we're intentionally like date night or like we're trying to get the hang of how to set up that we have enough of those kinds of windows so that
Yeah,
we can actually tend to what's needed to actually tend to each other. And
yeah.
I think that's like been a real big teacher because it's one thing, the version before we had a toddler, well, we'll just sit and we'll breathe together and we'll, like, and now it's like things are flying around the room and like we got to get going, just all the he's hungry. And so, it's like the next level of okay.
One
Oh,
thing,
but
I mean, I'm sure you're doing so many things in this realm.
yeah, no, I'd love to
But
hear.
just a couple things. Well, one is rhythm, because the more you have a steady rhythm, the more you can count on at this point in time, he's sleeping, and then you
Yes.
actually have another solid hour or two. So that's one thing. The other thing is humor, you
Mhm,
know, and realizing, yes, it's my stuff or your stuff, but really we're just humans and it's funny, and like creating a culture and a language where you can
mm,
kind of, you're not denying something's up, but you can switch into humor quickly. Um, the other one is to, because sometimes, like you said, Courtney, things happen, but then you've got to get in the car and go somewhere. And
mhm,
so you
mhm,
want to make sure they don't accumulate. Because by the time evenings come, it's probably sort of fine, and then you're tired, and why bring something up when there's actually some harmony again? You don't want to mess up the harmony kind of thing. But then these things can kind of accumulate. So
Hmm.
I'll often say, have a notebook and just write it down, because you don't need to do the depth of,
Mhm.
process and exploring and all that every night. Like, that can be a lot. Sometimes you just want to watch a movie, rub each
Mhm.
other's feet, listen to some nice music. So you can have just, and then you can write it down so it doesn't get lost. And then you can actually do some neat work, because you can start seeing, is there a pattern? Is what Sometimes it's just a one-off, like not enough sleep, something like that. But sometimes there's a pattern, and so then when you actually do, a session together, you have a little bit more data points on what's at the deeper piece.
Mhm.
And
Like
the other,
tracking.
maybe just quickly, because I do think I just want to bring it back because it's so pertinent. I don't think we do this enough. Like, it's very quick to say, go, look at the world behind your child's eyes, or look at the world behind your partner's eyes. But to actually do it is quite a deep meditation. And sometimes a lot of stuff that we think we need to talk through, we don't actually need to. Because we don't need to change our partner to become who we are. It's also impossible. Even if that's a deep wish that most of us secretly have. It's like, I've got a checklist. If you were just more like this, it would be fine, right? But we literally can't change the other partner. Um, but something about, I've been in a marriage now for, I mean, it's getting close to 30 years. And we've had an evolutionary contract for literally from the get-go, like in our early 20s. And sometimes it's hard, like really hard. One thing I can say is, one of the most beautiful things on this journey has been, for me, just talking for myself, to make more and more space for who my partner actually just is. Like,
Yeah.
and so it's not, he needs to do this, that, more. Like, some, yes, there's place for feedback and reflection, and shifts and corrections, but a big part of it has been to constantly keep the question, who are you? Like, keep refreshing, almost like, keep refreshing your screen. Like, don't know, oh, I just know who he is or she is, and they're just like this, and never and always, and all these things that kind of kill relationships. It's like, who are you? Sort of fresh every moment. And when we hit impasses, to do that deeper meditation, which you can do yourself. I mean, you can even do it in quiet time when you're driving to town, if you have quiet time. Um, Yeah, I was just thinking toddler. Okay, maybe
Not a lot of
That's,
quiet.
I love that you brought humor in. I like beautifully how you did
not. But
that.
which brings back the modeling. But quickly, just to finish off
Yeah.
this last bit, is like, you need to suspend. We can get so held in our own subjective perspective, which feels so relevant and so
Mhm.
real to us. And it's like, this is a practice, is to take it a bit more lightly. Like, I honor it, and I'm taking it a bit more lightly. So I'm going to suspend it. I'm going to put it on the shelf once in a while. And I'm going to do my best. It's going to be limited, because I'm not my partner, and he remains an ongoing mystery to me. But from all the intel and all the inquiry I've done over the years, and all the observations, like, and the question of who are you, it's like, just make space for his reality, and actually let that imbue me, and try and see the world, or this particular friction, through his eyes, through his heart, through his ears, or in your case, Mike, through her heart, her eyes, her ears. Like, and just see, it doesn't even need to reach a conclusion, but it softens us. Like,
Mhm.
the way I think
Mhm.
often when there's impasses, we think we need to figure it out here, but what really needs to happen is we need to make the context bigger. Like, we need to let more love enter the space, more patience, more resilience. You know, we need to literally make the space bigger, rather than crunch it out at this level.
Mhm.
Mm.
Um,
It's so true.
yeah. Anyways,
You're
like I
so
said,
beautiful.
that's a lot more, so much there.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that in. It feels like such a good place to like land on, because what I feel like you're describing are the qualities and the essence of maturity. Like, can
Right.
we actually, because what I have found is, when there is the capacity to actually understand a situation or another person, compassion just does come. like that's just the natural response if there's an understanding. But if there's a misunderstanding, that's the place of like that
Yeah.
reptilian mind, the fight, the flight, the
Mhm.
freeze. So I love that you're talking about that and bringing in the practice of actually doing that work in these moments of stillness and space, is like actually contemplating that perspective from the other world. I know
Mhm.
in this conversation, it's brought in so many pauses in the place where there is some sort of narrative or belief when it comes to the parenting or even the partnership of like, oh, that's an opportunity to loosen that up a little bit and
Mhm.
actually inquire more. Like,
Yeah.
what is going on in their world? What's going on in Cedar's world? What's going on in my inner child world that I don't even see,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
needs to be loved and heard? And
Well,
yeah.
and I find, I had a I just had a breakthrough last night where I went into that practice with something with Mike, and then I had this idea like, "Oh, I can see what's needed." And then I was able to bring a
Mhm.
different ingredient to him, and it wasn't from us hashing it out, it was actually from me deeply
Yeah, you're
holding
making
that.
space for her in that moment, right? You
Ye
actually exchange
Yeah,
and trying to get the other person to come to your side, or
yeah. And
there's
then it
please.
Oh, sorry. Well, just and that building that muscle of trusting that the field is gonna help us, that something's gonna come through, like that trust,
Yeah,
right?
that
Yeah.
is deep, deep practice. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Maybe just to tie up this little question, or big question you had, Courtney, is I think we also want to often present a very harmonious, cohesive front to our kid. And I think in general that works as long as no one's compromising on their values. Like, it's actually a good practice that, if he goes to his papa and says, "Can I please this?" and you say no, and then he goes to his mama hoping
Mm,
for yes, that there's a solidity there that you're
mhm,
actually together. Um, so for the most part, yes. However, when there is real tension, especially, and we're talking now beyond toddler years, like when your kid is 10 or 15, like they are smart and they pick up and know way more than we think. Um, and in a way, I feel like kids deserve truth. Like that is, the part of honoring them as a whole human being is they also deserve truth, offered sort of wrapped in a language and a conceptual reality that is digestible developmentally for them, right? And there's things they don't need to know about what's happening between the parents. But when they are picking up on something not making sense, in this is, the one place where I actually feel like it's a place to model for one's child how two humans journey together. It's like it's better for a child's developing brain to understand that mom and dad don't agree on something, and here's one
mhm,
point of view and here's another point of view, um, than to pretend there's a shared front.
mhm,
As long as that is done without, um, what's the word, alienating the other parent for the child, like that is like sacrosanct. You really don't want to speak badly about the other, if anything, only in the sense, like, like, I'm just thinking, if say there's a moment when Adonia would say to my husband Stefan, like, Miriam seems like a little hard today, which is something she could easily have said, multiple times in her growing up, and he would have said, no, no, she's fine. Well, he
mhm,
basically, for one thing, just lied to her and created cognitive dissonance, and not just cognitive, like human being dissonance of like, your observational skills are actually not on par with reality. That's terrible. It's like
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
much better to go, yes, I've noticed that too. We could go ask her what's actually happening for her. Or I've noticed that she sometimes, and she's even shared that with me, like I'm talking like I'm Steph now. She's shared with me that sometimes when she gets hard like that underneath, she's actually sad, or she's stressed, or scared. So there's something underneath. So maybe we can, figure out what's underneath. And like, in a way, there's never the putting down of the other partner. There's more the opening up to more empathy and compassion, that we're all human beings on a journey, you know, doing the
mhm.
best we can. But I
And in that, there's that feeling of togetherness, like what you
yes,
I just want to like
yeah,
that it's like we're in it together. So
yeah,
then the child's not alone in that.
yeah.
It's like, "Oh, well, let's figure this out
Yeah,
together."
and
Yeah.
why I wanted to kind of mention that is because we can get a little tense around we have to have harmony in the couple. But we're two, each couple is two individuals plus a wee space. Like there's three entities at play at all times. And so you don't want to model fake harmony. And I'm not saying you were doing that at all. I was more just speaking from my
Yes, no, it's
listening, like we
important,
don't want
yeah.
to tip into let's just pretend. There's a certain containment that is done that then is dealt with, over not too long of a period of time. That's great. But if there really is stuff that's off, I feel like we owe it to our kids to honor their sense making capacity, which is developing. And this is something I learned way back when I was studying psychology of children and youth. I remember this one super inspiring professor, and he said, from all his research, kids as young as 6 can easily handle two parents having different opinions about things. Like,
Mhm.
that is a cognitive capacity that is quite easy. It's like, well, he's my dad's more free when we go to town. He doesn't think about all the snacks and the water and the shoes. And if we need something, we'll just go to the dollar store and get it, kind of thing. And my mom, she likes to have everything prepped and ready. I mean, I'm kind of like talking about me and Steph here, you know, and that actually happened. He like left the house and I'm like, you have new shoes when they came home. I was like, yeah, we forgot. I'm like,
This is
oh my
this you're describing our dynamic too. I'm like, "But do you have all the things?" He's like, "We don't need them."
yeah, exactly.
Got
And
new shoes today in town.
that's the beauty of the village. You're a mini village,
Yeah.
and it's the
Yeah.
beautiful thing of growing up with multiple people in your son's environment is he does things like that. She's like this. He's jolly. She's, very caring. Whatever it might be. Yeah.
Well, and what I'm hearing in there though is, and this is I think what you're saying to the discernment is in that is if maybe I might have a moment of frustration or something, but where I'm not just like so angry at him and then, alienating in that way. And there's space for difference. That's what I'm hearing. And then that way we're modeling holding difference. And so then he'll be able to hold that
Exactly.
difference as opposed to if we aren't allowing difference and we're constantly fighting to be the same all the time, that's where it's going to be tricky, right? Yeah, that's what I'm hearing
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, so
there's
good.
so good. There's so many veins I'd love to continue to follow. This is a forever learning place and topic. And, Miriam, I just really want to thank you for the work that you're doing in the world because I noticed just in my own nervous system, the three of us having this conversation, and I can feel the perspectives that you're offering and you're bringing, and the way that you've really embodied your journey as a mother as well. It brings in a felt sense of compassion in my own nervous system of
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, there's like, ah, okay, it's not bad, wrong. We're learning, it's humbling, it is intense sometimes. And yeah, just thank you for bringing the grace into the
Mhm.
field and a topic that can be really charging or frightening or frustrating and beautiful too, all of the things. So thanks for bringing that grace, that beauty, the compassion to the realm of parenting and partnership.
Yeah, I feel it feels very affirmative and it
Mhm.
feels very for us like that role model, like you're a role model
Yes.
for us because I can feel when you're speaking that you've walked this, that
Oh,
you are walking, and
yeah.
that is really like, I feel mine or, oh, okay, yeah, this is what we're doing. Oh, yay. Like that mirror and the softening and the exploration. So thank you for being that in our community. And I'm so excited to share you with our audience too. And yeah. And
Thank
then
you.
Miriam does work with people too. So we'll include her link, in the show notes in case you want to look into her on her course that she's got online. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, Miriam.
I think the links will speak for themselves. Yeah, I just
Okay.
wanted to really end with thanking you also. It's such a joy because I come away also just feeling like it's just so endlessly fascinating, isn't it? Like it's exciting. It's like it's just such a beautiful topic to explore, forever humbling, but also it's celebratory. Like, how incredible that we get to do this work in couples, with ourselves, with friends, in villages, with our little ones. And, you know, I really do want to say thank you to both of you for what you are inhabiting, embodying with your son and with each other, because it is worth so much. And I don't think parents hear that enough. Um, and you are literally walking what you're talking about, in this beautiful framework of it being a practice. So it's a joy. Like I feel uplifted every time I can be in the presence of others who are caring so deeply and steadfast in their commitment to doing their finest as humans.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
Thank
what
you.
an honor. Oh, and thank you all listeners tuning in to this juicy conversation. And if anything comes up, you have questions or insights, we'd love to hear them. You can share them down in the comments below, or you can find us on social media. You can email us. You can email Miriam. We'll put links down there. I'm sure. Well, I've offered it to you if that feels good for you. Yes. Yeah. Thank you all for listening in, so that we can really learn how to be the best humans as possible, and parents and partners and
Celebrating you all out there that are doing that work. And
yes.
to any of you that maybe aren't, but maybe you know of a mama and a papa that are doing that, it's always really great to also give them those reflections.
Yeah.
And know that you hold another layer in the village that's really important too. So,
Yeah. So deeply appreciated. Beautiful. Till next time. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Now, a shout out for our sponsor, Mindful Meds. They have such a wide range of medicinal mushrooms. My favorite, Happy Days. No psilocybin in that one, just lion's mane, cordyceps. There's black pepper, just ashwagandha, all the good stuff. And if you do prefer more of the psilocybin, they have a huge range. They have one where they've collaborated with Kid Carson out of Vancouver. It's called Social Spark. Amazing feedback on it. And so many other good ones. So if you are wanting to replenish your supply, if you're already using their product, or if you're new to this space and you want to start using and trying out some product, because you're listening, you get a discount, 15% off, for being incredible humans tuning into this relational space. And so all you got to do is put in the promo code TOGETHER and you'll get those dollars back in your pocket. Till next time.